You know, um, you know that feeling when you hit a certain point in adulthood, maybe your late 20s, 30s, midlife, whatever it is, and you suddenly wake up one morning with this cold realization that an entire year has just passed in what feels like just a few months.
Oh, yeah. It's a deeply unsettling moment when you first become consciously aware of it.
Right. You look back at the calendar and, objectively that you were incredibly busy. I mean, you went to work, you paid the bills, you worked out, you hit your deadlines, showed up for your family,
Yeah, the days were packed.
completely packed to the brim. And yet, when you try to actually recall the texture of that year, very little of it stands out. It's just this, I don't know, this smooth, frictionless, terrifying blur.
Exactly. And most of us just, well, we sort of wave it away. We blame it on the inevitable reality of getting older, or just taking on more responsibilities.
Yeah, we just assume time speeds up. Like
Yeah.
it's just the price of admission for adulthood.
Right. But shrugging it off like that, it completely ignores the actual neurobiology at play here. And more importantly, it ignores the fact that we have far more control over this phenomenon than we realize.
Which is exactly why we are pulling this apart today. We are doing a deep dive into some absolutely fascinating material from the Finch Q team. It's a text titled, Why Some Lives Feel Full and Others Pass Quietly.
It is such a brilliant framing of the issue.
It really is. And the mission for our deep dive today isn't just to validate that midlife time panic we all feel. We really want to explore the invisible mechanics of how your brain literally manufactures the sensation of time.
Because it's a completely manufactured sensation, yeah.
Exactly. We want to decode why identical routines affect our memories so differently and figure out how to stop our own lives from turning into that unmemorable blur. So where do we even start with this?
Well, the essential baseline to establish here is that time, as we experience it anyway, is entirely a biological construct. I mean, the physics of the universe are not shifting as you age. The Earth isn't spinning faster.
Right, a minute is still a minute.
Exactly. What shifts is the apparatus measuring it. Because unlike light, which has the eyes, or sound, which has the ears, the human body does not have a dedicated sensory organ for time.
Oh, wow. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, so the brain has to retroactively calculate how much time has passed based on how much new data it was forced to process. Basically, it builds time through markers, not minutes.
Markers, not minutes. Okay, let's unpack this because naturally when we hear that the brain needs markers, we jump to the most obvious conclusion. I mean, I know I do.
That you need to just pack your schedule.
Yes. You assume the best way to get those markers is to stay relentlessly busy.
Yeah.
You join a book club, you volunteer, schedule back-to-back meetings, fill every single hour of the weekend.
From the outside, it looks like this vibrant, high-velocity life.
Right. But the Finch Q material completely flips this assumption on its head, right? Because they argue that activity and busyness do not automatically equal memory markers.
Not at all. And the text makes this core argument activity fills time, but it doesn't structure it.
Okay, wait, explain that distinction because that feels huge.
It's the linchpin of everything we are talking about today. There is a specific phrase from the source that just perfectly captures this. Repetition, even when active, compresses experience.
Repetition compresses experience.
Yeah. If you are doing a million things, but those million things are part of a deeply entrenched, unchanging routine, your brain literally doesn't bother recording them.
Okay, I like to think of it like a video compression algorithm. Like if you have a security camera pointing at an empty hallway, right?
Right.
Storing 60 frames a second of just an unchanging wall takes up massive amounts of hard drive space. So the algorithm doesn't save every single pixel in every single frame. It saves the first frame, and then it only records the pixels that physically change in the subsequent frames.
That is a perfect analogy.
So if nobody walks down the hallway, the algorithm essentially records nothing. It just says, refer to frame 1.
And that is exactly what the human brain does to conserve metabolic energy. The brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ, and encoding memory is biologically expensive.
It takes actual resources.
Exactly. So think about commuting to work on pure autopilot. You're taking the same roads, hitting the same lights, listening to the same morning show.
Oh man, the amount of times I've driven home and have no memory of the drive.
Right. Your brain recognizes the pattern immediately. It says, I already have the blueprint for this. I don't need to burn glucose recording this Tuesday. So 45 minutes of driving compresses into a single microscopic file in your memory. It just becomes invisible.
But if there's a detour or, I don't know, a road closure, and you're forced to navigate unfamiliar streets, maybe you notice the strange architecture of a house you've never seen, or you have to pay attention to a different traffic pattern, your brain is suddenly forced to wake up.
It has to record the new pixels, to use your analogy.
Yeah, even if that detour takes the exact same 45 minutes, that drive actually takes up physical space in your memory.
Because it breaks the continuity. The researchers call that autopilot state continuity without separation. And when life is continuous and unseparated, it just vanishes.
Continuity without separation, wow.
They actually highlight a really interesting scenario in the text, comparing two people to illustrate this. So imagine two people living virtually cloned weeks. Both work the exact same hours, both commute, both go to the same gym,
So their output is totally identical.
completely identical. But one of them introduces microscopic, almost imperceptible separations. Like they take a slightly different route to the office, or they eat lunch on a different bench. Maybe they just reverse the order of their evening routine.
Just tiny little tweaks.
Right. And the other person just locks into the groove and repeats the exact same pattern every single day.
And the result of that is wild, right?
Yeah.
Because months later, the person who made those small changes remembers distinct periods. Their year has actual texture, chapters.
Yeah, while the person who repeated the same pattern is the one waking up terrified that a whole year just evaporated.
But the tragic part is that the second person feels like they were doing everything right. Like they were active, they were disciplined.
But because they didn't feed their brain any novel data, the video compression algorithm just tossed all those active days straight in the trash.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
And I want to push back on this a little bit because this brings up a massive question.
Go for it.
If standard busyness like mental tasks or social activities doesn't create these markers, what actually does? Because the text makes a very specific pivot here. It suggests that the body itself, like our physical musculoskeletal movement, is what dictates how time is stored.
That's right.
Wait, hold on. We are always told, stay active, keep moving. Are you telling me that if I run 5 miles on the exact same treadmill at the exact same pace every single day, I might actually be making my year feel shorter?
What's fascinating here is, and it sounds completely counterintuitive because it violates the golden rule of modern health advice, but yes, your daily treadmill run is likely compressing your perception of time.
That is insane to me.
Well, the critical distinction rarely made in health advice is that movement can either structure time or it can flatten it. If your movement is entirely repetitive, automatic, and unvaried, the brain literally files it under known pattern, ignore.
So we're basically turning our bodies into metronomes. We're just ticking away the time, but we aren't actually recording any music.
That's a really profound way to look at it. And the reason physical movement is so deeply tied to time perception actually comes down to the hippocampus.
Okay, the memory center.
Right. It's the part of the brain responsible for our autobiographical memory, the timeline of who we are and what we've done. But evolutionarily, before the hippocampus was mapping abstract concepts like time, it evolved to map physical space.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it is full of what are called grid cells that fire when we navigate our physical environment.
So spatial navigation and chronological memory are running on the exact same hardware in the brain.
They are inextricably linked. When you run on a treadmill, you are moving, sure, but you are not navigating space. The environment never changes. The grid cells have nothing to do.
So no spatial markers are created.
Exactly. And which means no temporal markers are created. But if you take that exact same 5-mile run and put it on a wooded trail, everything changes.
Because your brain has to calculate like the height of a route to avoid tripping over it.
Right. It has to adjust your stride for the mud, map the change in elevation, track the shifting light through the trees. Your body is engaging in adaptive, changing, responsive movement.
Because the brain has to stay online to process all those micro-adaptations, it's forced to hit record.
The trail run becomes a memory marker. The treadmill run becomes background noise. And this brings us to the structural reality of how the brain archives a year. The researchers emphasize the difference between a time block and a sequence.
A time block. So that's what happens when everything is the same.
Exactly. A year filled with physically similar, unvarying days. Identical commutes, identical treadmill runs, the identical posture at the identical desk. It all just fuses together. The brain looks back at those 365 days and drops them all into a single, highly compressed file folder.
Labeled routine.
Right. It becomes a single block in the brain. But a year filled with physical variation becomes a sequence, a string of distinct individual events. And sequences are the only things the brain can actually hold on to.
So if you want your life to feel long, you literally have to feed your brain sequences through varied movement.
Exactly.
Okay, so if varied movement is the key to expanding time, why do we naturally fall into such repetitive, flattened physical routines without even realizing it?
Well, biological organisms love efficiency. We
Mm.
just default to the path of least resistance.
Which makes sense.
Right.
But this leads to a concept in the text that I thought was brilliant. The gap between what our bodies can do and what they actually do. It's like owning a high-performance sports car, but only ever driving it 20 miles per hour down the street to the grocery store.
That is a great analogy. We constantly assume that our physical capacity matches our daily reality. But the researchers break this down into observed function versus lived function.
Okay, define those for me. What is observed function?
Observed function is what happens in a clinic, under a spotlight.
Yeah.
When you go into a doctor's office or a physical therapist for an evaluation, you know you are being measured, right?
Totally. You stand up a little taller.
Exactly. You focus intently on your balance. You walk with a brisk, intentional stride to show the doctor you're perfectly healthy. You drive the sports car fast.
But the spotlight turns off the second you walk out the clinic doors and into the parking lot.
And that is when lived function takes over. Lived function is what actually happens in real life. On a random Tuesday at 4 p.m. when you are completely distracted by a text message and carrying heavy groceries.
When you aren't paying attention.
Right. And the text details exactly what takes over when we aren't paying attention. Our stride length subtly shortens. We introduce less variation in our gait. We start exercising these little micro cautions.
Like what kind of micro cautions?
Like maybe we stop stepping up and over a curb and instead we subconsciously walk 5 feet further just to use the ramp. Or we avoid certain movements entirely.
Oh, man. We stop reaching for the top shelf with both arms and just default to our dominant side.
Yeah.
We stop twisting our torso to look behind us and just rely entirely on the rear view mirror. Our physical world physically shrinks.
We do it because it's easier. And let's be honest, our modern environments are engineered to eliminate physical variation. Elevators, flat floors, ergonomic chairs, they all reduce the demand on our bodies.
But the stakes here are so high.
Incredibly high. Because this daily lived function is what actually shapes both our physical resilience and the structure of time in our memory.
Yeah.
They're degrading simultaneously.
So if your lived function narrows down to this tiny bandwidth of repetitive movements, your physical resilience plummets because you're never challenging your body to adapt.
You lose the capacity you don't use.
Right. And at the exact same time, because your physical movements are so constrained and predictable, your brain stops getting any novel spatial markers. The compression algorithm kicks in, and the year just vanishes.
It's a dual threat. We lose our physical capability and our perceived time in the same invisible sweep. And because lived function happens in the background, we are completely blind to our own physical routines narrowing.
So how do we catch it? If we connect this to the bigger picture, how do we fix a trap that we can't even see? Because the way we currently measure ourselves seems totally broken.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the problem with current clinical or digital systems is that they focus entirely on snapshots. Test scores,
Right. The yearly physical exam is just one snapshot.
Exactly. Or even a smartwatch that tells you your resting heart rate today. It's just a point-in-time score. It tells you your observed function in a vacuum, but it completely misses the slow drift and gradual narrowing of your real life.
The source material uses a really good analogy for this snapshot problem. It's like having a folder of 1,000 photos of yourself from the past 10 years and just scrolling through them rapidly.
The sheer volume makes you blind to the change.
Right. Because the change from day 1 to day 2 is so microscopically small, you don't see any difference. You're blind to the gradual changes occurring between the moments. It's only when you take photo number 1 and put it directly next to photo number 1,000 that you gasp.
And realize how much has changed. But current health tracking just looks at today's photo and says, looks fine. It doesn't connect the dots.
So what does this all mean? If the Finch-Q perspective isn't about intervening in the moment like triggering alerts to stand up or monitoring behavior like a typical smartwatch, how does just seeing the pattern actually help you?
This raises an important question because usually tech companies just want to be an annoying micromanager, right? Buzzing your wrist every hour.
Yelling at you to do 3 lunges?
Right. But the Finch-Q perspective is totally different. It's about revealing long-term patterns across real life continuously. When those patterns are visible, the small changes aren't invisible anymore.
You can actually see the drift.
Exactly. Stability can be recognized early. It shifts the entire goalpost from, are you performing well today, to what kind of life is your body actually building over time?
You're essentially handing people the blueprints to their own lived experience. If you don't know the foundation is sinking, you can't fix the house.
Precisely. Once you see that your movement pattern for the entire winter has been completely identical and physically constrained, you organically connect the dots. You realize, oh, no wonder January and February disappeared. I haven't given my brain a single variation to hold on to.
That organic self-awareness is so much more powerful than a watch buzzing at you.
Yeah.
You aren't just guessing. You are actively restructuring the patterns that dictate how your life is recorded.
Which is exactly what this is all about.
Okay, so bringing this all together, the ultimate thesis of this deep dive is that time, movement, and bodily function are not separate things.
Not at all. They're the exact same system viewed from different angles.
I love that. Time is how life is experienced, movement is how it's physically expressed, and patterns are how it's recorded in the mind. You can't alter one without altering the others.
It really redefines the concept of age. Functional age isn't just a number you get from balancing on one leg in a clinic for 30 seconds.
Right.
It's a reflection of how stable, adaptable, and varied your physical patterns are over time out in the real world. Think about how kids move. They are constantly exploring, climbing, falling, recovering.
And because their physical expression is so wildly varied, their perception of time expands massively. A single summer feels like an entire lifetime.
Exactly. As the text says, a structured life is the one we remember. The lives that feel rich and long feel that way because there was more adaptation to the immediate environment, more novel physical inputs. The difference between a life that feels long and a life that passes quietly isn't in the clock on the wall, it's in the physical pattern of how you move through your day.
Wow. And what we cannot see in that pattern, we slowly, silently lose in time. We've spent this entire deep dive exploring the invisible mechanics of time perception and how easily our brains default to that compression algorithm when we stop introducing novel movement.
It's been a really eye-opening conversation.
Truly. So, knowing that your brain only holds on to the variations, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. If your brain only records the anomalies, what is one small, completely intentional disruption you could introduce to your most deeply entrenched physical routine tomorrow? Just one tiny change, a new route, a complex environment, a different way of moving your body, just to guarantee that this week doesn't disappear into a blur.